Good morning. All right, good, good. Happy Friday. Um, because we have two report outs, we'll sort of get right to it. Um, I'm really thankful everybody's here, and I'll just hand it right off to Jean.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce the procurement team. By the way, I just want to say that they did a phenomenal job this week, so it was a pleasure to work with them. Also, I just wanted to mention that Vince is going to be doing a 60-day report out too at the end. So, go ahead.
All right, thanks. My name's Dave Swidensky, and we're Team Awesome. The team included Brandon Mollis, Jason Kearns, Rihanna Galen, Amy Ingram, who's sick and couldn't be here today, myself, Georgianne Chapman, Yua Her, and Antoinette Chavez. We want to give and recognize and give a special thanks to Bill Haskell, who got the building back in order after the power outage yesterday, Bob Mahoney and Brian Good for their guidance, Patty Wells, Jeff Davis, and Tatiana Papachondria for their legal insight and opinions on what should be reviewed, and anyone else that we may have missed. The reason for action, phases 2 through 4 of the competitive selection process development currently have no standard work and results in some confusion, some excess handoffs, time for review, and there's some defects in the process. The aim was to develop a future state map with steps and handoffs, key stakeholders, roles, project impacts for phase 2, which is contract advertisement, phase 3, which is contract evaluation, and phase 4, which is award and execution of procurement's competitive selection process, and standard work for engagement between the procurement staff and the contract administrator. The scope included phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 of the process. It included goods and services that require competitive selection process that are not procured by engineering or the purchasing team.
So currently, from our solicitation process to execution of that particular solicitation, it takes 57 days, and it's 35 or 34 handoffs to complete that process currently. So what we did is this is a vision of our future state on what we'd like to do in terms of making the process more efficient. And one of the things, though, in developing our new processes and stuff, we really wanted to listen to the voice of the customer. It was very important to hear what pain points our customers were experiencing and what we can do to improve our customer service to our internal customer. And that's one of the things that we looked at, all of these treasures that we got and worked on improving our process.
So we started the week off developing 6 alternatives to phases 2 through 4. And then from those 6 alternatives, we took the best of each and made hybrid alternatives, resulting in the new process map for phases 2 through 4. So cutting it down to 13 handoffs and ranging anywhere from 25 to 35 days. We wanted to show you a comparison of current state and our future state on one slide so you could see the difference between the process. When we started the value stream, the roles and responsibilities were unclear, and because of the blurred lines, there was a lot of rework and also a greater tolerance for defects in this process. This resulted in a really long lead time of 107 days. So during the value stream refresh, we looked at clarifying roles and responsibilities and organizing the work into flow cells, increasing efficiency, as well as maximizing human talent. The dotted line on the bottom map is a clear distinction between the handoff of the business and procurement. What this means is that we will no longer accept procurement requests that do not have a complete scope of work. But don't worry, we've developed a lot of tools to help you be successful. The result of this means that we will have a more efficient sourcing process ranging between 50 and 60 days. This week, the team identified that there were 22 standard work tools that were required to implement this new process, such as procedures and templates. So we want to take some time to introduce those tools to you in the next few slides. When we looked at tools, we not only considered tools that would make procurement successful, but we considered our internal stakeholders as well as our vendors to remove those barriers to entry. This is the first of the tools, and it's a pre-bid conference guide. We're going to use this tool to train both contract specialists on what's expected during a pre-bid conference and how to facilitate, as well as coaching our contract administrators on how to prepare for a pre-bid and deliver that information to vendors.
All right. One of the other tools that we created was a flow cell evaluation process. Rather than distributing proposals and giving everyone about 2 weeks to evaluate them, we're going to collaborate and we're going to bring everyone together in the same room, and we're going to decide as a group which ones that we think should go on to the next step. And this next step is the interview process, where we created an agenda to bring those business partners to Denver Water quicker, and so we can evaluate and see which is the best partner for Denver Water. The next tool we think that will help build trust in our process is going to be a memorandum of award decision. This is going to be created by the team from what we've found out throughout that evaluation process, so we can give to the chiefs and then give them a sense of trust of why we chose the vendor that we chose.
Next, we have flow cell number 2, which is same concept as the evaluation flow cell, just getting the right people in the room who can give final feedback and input and approve the agreement. The goal is to have the vendor present and, if necessary, legal present, so we can walk out of that meeting with an agreement signed by legal and the contractor. Next is a lessons learned document. It's just a place for us to, after we have that signed agreement, sit down with the contract administrator and go over what were some of our successes, some of our challenges. Did we have problem with participation on this bid? Did we have a lot of SBE and WBE participation? Stuff like that will prove beneficial for future similar solicitations or when we go to rebid that solicitation. And then this is our process control visual. You can see by the graph on the left that we are tracking the average lead time by procurement start date starting in June of last year. Obviously, there are some outliers here with special circumstances, but as you can see, starting at about December, our lead time is consistently under 100 days for delivered, and we've already delivered a few contracts in under 60 days this year. On the top right, we have our scope problem Pareto chart, which tracks the reasons for a scope being rejected by us and it not being robust. And then on the bottom right, we have a Pareto chart of reasons for procurement delays. So when a piece of the process takes longer than we think it should, we track those days and categorize it into one of the different 8 types of operational waste.
Okay, metrics. So as you mentioned a few slides back, in our current state map, it takes us an average of 107 days to complete a procurement from start to finish. And when we identified that in our first value stream analysis back in June, our goal was to create a process that takes 60 business days from start to finish. And the purpose of this 2P event was to specifically look at phases 2 through 4. So from advertisement, when we release the RFP, up until execution of the contract, we were trying to get that process down to, we had an initial target of 42 days, but by going through this process, we thought that 50 days was a more reasonable target for that. And 50 days, coupled with phase 1 development, still keeps us within that 60-day total target. So phase 2 advertisement starts when we release an RFP up until when we collect proposals from vendors. Currently, that takes us about 20 days, so 4 business weeks. We're looking to try to take that down to 3 weeks depending on how robust the scope of work is for that proposal and how much more time we need to allow vendors to respond to those. Phase 3, evaluation and negotiation. So that's from receiving the proposals from vendors up until right before contract award. Currently takes us 15 days. We're actually looking to push that up by 3 days. The reason being is we've moved negotiation from phase 4, which used to be negotiation and award, up into phase 3. We think it's more beneficial for us to have all negotiating and evaluation done in the same phase. It gives Denver Water better leverage in negotiating its contracts and ultimately leads us to getting a more favorable contract. And then phase 4 takes us 17 days, and we think we can actually improve upon that, partially because we moved negotiation up to phase 3, which is about 3 days. But as mentioned before, we have that agreement flow cell where we have all the decision makers in the room and hopefully get the contract knocked out much quicker rather than going back and forth negotiating contract terms and conditions. Other than that, the DocuSign phase, we're looking to take down by about 3 days, and then with new board approval limits, we're hopefully going to push through more contracts faster because we're not having to get on that board calendar date. Completion plan. So part of this 2P event was identifying action items that we needed to facilitate bringing our entire process down to 60 days. We had initially identified about 24 items, so we think it was a success just to have only 4 left, 2 of which are mainly bookkeeping items, trying to organize all these templates and have them in a standard format. Our insights on the event. So this is our 3rd lean event as a team since June, so we're really starting to understand the process. And when we're going through this process with the end goal in mind, we're getting much more efficient at identifying what action items we need to do and how to bring down our total cycle time. Another thing we saw as a unique thing, particularly to our events, is that we have our entire contract team in these events, so everybody is involved in the decision-making process, along with the fresh eyes that we got from Dave and Georgianne, who's not here today, but they were able to provide valuable insights in how to make our process more user-friendly to the people who are eventually going to be using those contracts. As always, we're feeling tired after this event. We spent 8 hours a day in this room over here, but we're also feeling accomplished that we can ideally take down our entire process from 107 days to 60 days. And by doing this process, we think we're hitting on all of Denver Water's key values. Vision, we restructured the process to be more efficient, and it is a government process, but it doesn't have to still look like every other government's process. And then also integrity. By reducing this time, it's going to allow us to work on more contracts and produce more contracts in a shorter time. And with that, we'll open it up to any questions.
I just want to comment real quickly that you guys mentioned the board raising their authority limit to $750,000, which, along with making it a lot easier on the process and all of that, is a really significant event in terms of some initiatives that we've been working on for 4 or 5 years in terms of getting to this point. We've been talking to the board about getting to a point where we don't have to be bringing all of these contracts to them on a one-off basis for them to see, because they frankly have already approved these contracts in the budget theoretically. And by approving the budget, they should be authorizing us to move forward. And part of getting the board to that point has been, for example, in this process, assuring that our procurement processes are rigorous, that they're competitive, that we're getting the best price for our ratepayers, that they're inclusive, that we're reaching out to small businesses and minority-owned businesses for procurement, that we are making business, Denver Water business, available throughout the business community. Everything from ORCA to the budgeting process has fed into this event. We're moving toward, this is kind of an interim step for the board to raise the spending limit to $750,000. We're going to work with them on a narrative resolution that basically allows us to operate by exception, so that if it's in the budget, we can just do it without their approval. And if it's not in the budget, that doesn't mean we can't do it. It just means we need to go to the board on an exception basis and get approval to do it. The board's confidence in our quarterly reports, those are on inflow. I sent out an email, and you can see those comprehensive quarterly reports that we're doing organizationally for the board, that looks at our dashboards, it looks at our financials, it looks at how our performance up and down the line. So I just want to thank you guys for this work. It's really significant and has played a big part in moving us forward in our confidence with the board and toward this initiative. So thank you.
So the median starting from that initial point of June of last year, and the reason we track so far back was because we didn't have enough data when we started this process, was the median was more, it is around 104 days starting from then. I did pull the numbers starting from January of this year, and we are actually at an average of 85 days right now, starting average. Since January, so anything started January of 2017 through now, the average is 85 days, and you can kind of see that as it tracks through there starting in this year. But the median is still around 105, 106 days, in part because we do have a couple of those special circumstance procurements that came up that last year.
Patty, I know that there was a question about median versus average and what should we be tracking in terms of our lead time. So I've had Rihanna also track if there is a difference between the median and the average. And it was about the 3 days that we were looking at. So there was one procurement that took a really long time that had complex requirements in that procurement, but it didn't really skew our numbers that much. And we wanted to track both to see what was really the measure that we wanted to use going forward. So we're continuing to look at that median and average and then determining what would make sense. Lori? The goal for advertisement is phase 2, so we're looking at 15 business days, so about 3 weeks. And it could be, that's the long. It could be shorter than that if it's a simplistic procurement. And I just want to add to that we are really looking at removing barriers to entry. So some of the things that we've done since the value stream refresh, and in the last event we looked at development. So we looked at posting a shorter version of the RFP. One of the reasons for that is that we spend a lot of time at our desks working on and putting together these procurements. And it's not until the 3 months in that we actually have a conversation with contractors about what's available in the market. So we're really changing the way that we work with internal stakeholders as well as the vendor community. By publishing something that is shorter, we're going to spend more face time with the vendors. And so there's a parallel between this and the recruitment process. If you think about when you recruit for a job, you post a job description with the minimum requirements, you get resumes in, and then from there you make a selection and you bring in finalists to interview. We want to take a very similar approach, and we are mindful that it may not work for all situations, because there are some situations where there are going to be very complex requirements, and it might take longer than that. We might have a more comprehensive RFP that we have to advertise. But for most of what we do, we can use this process to make it easier. So we're not looking for big proposals back from the vendors. In fact, one of the standard work documents that we developed in hearing from our internal stakeholders, but also going out to outreach events where we've gotten feedback from the vendors, is that if you're a small or minority supplier, you may not have the resources to put together these big proposals. So we are looking at all aspects of this procurement process, and we wanted to reduce that barrier to entry. So we developed a template in which we want vendors to submit things back in this template, and it's really going to be a short form of value-added things. We talked to our internal stakeholders about, when we get these 30, 40-page proposals, are you reading them page for page? And most of the time we're finding out that we just don't have the capacity to get through all of that material. So let's just, let's narrow it down to the key requirements that we need to evaluate. We ask our vendors to focus on those value-added aspects of the proposal. They submit those in, we review it, and then we get in front of them and we let them present to us what are the solutions to our needs. And so we're really excited about that, and I know that it's scary to think that we're only going to advertise for 15 days, and sometimes it can be less than that, but we're not asking for a lot of information, and we're going to spend more face time doing that. I also want to share with you, Lori, that in the last 2P that we did, during the development phase, there's a lot of opportunity for us to get in front of vendors and to talk about how they can provide sources to Denver Water. So there might be something that there might be a procurement need where we may not know of the solutions in the market. And that first phase, we're going to allow vendors to come in and talk to us. We're going to have more of these collaborative sessions where we say we have a problem when we don't know what the solution is, and we want to know if there are any solutions. And they get to come in and consult with us and give us some feedback on how we should structure that procurement. So there's a lot of opportunity for procurement, and it's really changing the way that we do business internally and externally. Yes, we will still use BidNet, and that will be our primary portal along with the Denver Water website for advertising. We also will still send those procurements out to the associations as well. Any other questions? Thank you.
All right, so we also had another rapid improvement event looking at how do the work orders kind of flow through our process. This team is very passionate to make sure that we deliver a good work order to our supervisors, and when we get that work order back, we want to make sure and instill that on the backside there's a lot of work that still has to be done with it. So we want to make sure we're getting good work orders back from our supervisors as well. So I wanted to thank the team for doing a great job, and I will turn it over to Raylani.
That would be Raylani. Oh, but he's going to start.
So this is the water distribution workflow standardization report out. Welcome. We had a large team this week. We actually had 12 people. Drake Dennert and Michelle Shama were not able to come today, but going this way, we have Johnny Roybal, John Rodriguez, Todd Blake, Bobby Padilla, Aria Alvarado, Esperanza Paz, Brigida Castro, Neville, and Tom Grable, and Ray Smith. We would like to give a special thanks to Wyatt Gardner, Kevin Marquez, Mike Mercer, Tag Hogan, Joe Duran, and Rob Richmeyer.
Reason for action, why we did this, from the birth of the Maximo, there's a lot of discrepancies. Wrong business units are put in there, wrong failure codes, which causes us to get delays on traffic plans and permits. That trickles down to our external customers, our vendors. They have wrong business units, they can't bill us correctly, and it all trickles down to actually the customer. They'll contact Raylani and ARIA call centers. From the beginning, they get delays of the street cuts and the asphalt cuts, and that's their main headaches. They want their sod and they want their street back. But with this process, hopefully we could correct all those issues in the beginning and get our customers what they want.
So in our current state, we had multiple pain points. As you can see, probably the biggest things were no accountability, rework, and no checks and balances for getting the process from start to finish. And it's represented in our diagram. We have a large backlog that obviously continues to grow, and it's all being funneled, and you have multiple systems, so it's branching out. There's little eddies in there to kind of delay the process on those one-offs. And then as it goes, nothing comes back together. So at the end of the month for reports, the report information you're getting is not as reliable as it should be.
So as they stated previously, we were wanting to get all this data, and the people that we were getting it from were inconsistent with it, and the data that we were getting back wasn't a large enough sample that it gave us any good. So in short, we were dealing with crap, really. And so what we set as our target was a system or a process that would gather all that data efficiently and effectively. It was easier for the foreman or the people out in the field to gather the data for us, and we would take it and we would wrap it and we would present it in such a way that the reporting was accurate, that it was 100% reliable, and that it was such rich data that we could take it and we could do future projections and analysis on it without having to go back and talk to these field workers again.
Okay, we have a fishbone that we end up working with on this, and we kind of classified a lot of things, some of the problem issues that we had during the whole process. What we're trying to do is eliminate a lot of that to make it flow a little bit better. We're trying to catch stuff on the beginning of the process instead of on the back end. So that's just going to try to improve the whole streamline that we're trying to put together.
Workflow, and pretty much this tool helps us create some of the standard work. Some of the steps, the big steps are on the left side. Some of those were the verification process to make sure all fields were filled out correctly. That would actually start with the planner. From there, the planner would send it out to the foreman with good information, good data, so that way they're able to complete their work. From that point, the foreman will then suspend the work order. The planner will grasp that again and then actually verify to make sure the package is complete, so that way we have good information going out to vendors, and invoices and everything could be streamlined with good information.
Okay, it'd be back to me again. Okay, what we're doing is, just like I said, we're trying to streamline a lot of things that in our process. So what we're trying to do is, like I said before, we're trying to do everything up front, so we're getting an estimated size on our sod cuts and our street cuts, so I know that jobs are coming through. So on the back end, we can always cross-reference stuff that never followed the proper paperwork. So what we're trying to do is on the work permits, we're trying to do everything up front so we can catch it all on the back end, because truly it all comes back to our customers.
So with the backlog, we went in and we verified criterias and priorities, so then we can get it all formatted. But then we also went in and looked at all the foremen's lineups, and we saw that there was an overwhelming amount of work orders on there that they were not able to manage properly. So we went ahead and decided to remove things that they were not working on and give them 10 interruptible work orders and also 10 uninterruptible work orders, so then it made it easily for them to manage their workload.
Okay, so one of the biggest customer concerns is going to be sod restoration. That affects multiple groups, call center, us. We get a lot of complaints about it. This was kind of an issue for multiple reasons. Like we said, we're going to try and address this up front so that the work orders can get built sooner. We can get them on the list sooner. But another issue that we realized is that there's a lot of handoffs. So Assuming that the work order was completed in a timely manner, we would receive a child work order, or it would be handed off to the call center to send a letter out to the customer and give them the option for Denver Water to do restoration or give them money in lieu of that restoration. They would then have to go back 3 weeks later to check for that either returned letter, or if the customer didn't respond, we would then build the Maximo to have restoration done by Denver Water. Clearly, this delayed the process. Another issue is that Grounds is obviously a small group, and they're limited by weather and everything, time frame in which they can get the work done. So we're going to have Apex, a contractor we currently work with, come in and take over that sod restoration. Grounds will still maintain the landscape, rocks, mulch, things like that. They'll take care of that, but we'll see if the contractor can get the work done quickly and eliminate that downtime for the customer. We're also going to, right now during the experiment phase, eliminate that voucher option and just default to the restoration to see if it reduces some of that headache for you guys and us.
So as part of this rapid improvement event, we have identified quite a few enhancements and updates to two major systems involved, Maximo and M platform. So there are 8 Maximo enhancements that we have identified and 2 M platform updates. As far as M platform updates are concerned, they'll be going as part of our November release. But the Maximo updates, 3 must-have features will be implemented as early as next week. The remaining enhancements require some analysis, some investigation, and we need to involve other teams. So that is to be decided. But Relani and Tom forced me to give me a date. So I tricked them to believe TBD is 10 business days. But that is to be decided. And as Arya mentioned, any sod electric work is going to be outsourced to Apex. And we are in the process of cleaning up the backlog of workers. And once we start seeing good improvement in quality, we are going to revisit the process and see if we can reduce the number of handoffs involved.
Okay, so when we're looking at the metrics here, like they were saying, there's a lot of inaccuracy coming through, so that's where you get the backlog on the business unit. On failure code stuff, actually a lot of it was created wrong to begin with, so we're going to correct that in the front end. And then as it goes through, you can see the number was a little bit different, at least on the business unit. One thing to take in mind here is we're looking at 48% of the work done did not generate a paving request or a sod. And unless they request either one of those, nothing's going to get done. It doesn't run through the machine that we got for paving or a contractor for sod. So what's that looking on for paving? That means we got a hole out there that's going to become a pothole that we don't know about. So we got to get to them. So we got basically 2 buckets we're going to have to go after now for a backlog. All the completed work, we're going to have to make sure that at least there's a sod and a paving request done. So we're going to have to clean up the work that's already completed and then in the future we got, I don't know, 1,100 that we're going to try to get cleaned up before they even start their work. So that's kind of where we're sitting with the metrics.
These are some of our insights. What we learned that T&D has a very difficult process, and Maximo is complicated. What happens in the front affects people downstream. We feel good, motivated, hopeful, also very tired. And the values that we initiated this week are definitely passion. A lot of people passionate about improving the system and making it run effectively, and vision, seeing the streamlined future for the Maximo process. Questions or comments?
Go ahead, Ted.
Just a quick question. Are metrics going to change? We're going to work as
The metrics that we're keeping on that, we'll add delays into the process for waiting for permits and stuff like that. And obviously our standard of work for doing the job is different. You'll have a different playbook. But for this event, it won't change how we're creating a work order, getting all the business units and everything right, making sure all the children are attached to that and done so we can start the paving and stuff like that. So I don't think it would change on the county as much. May delay us getting permits. It'll be more difficult for sure. Patty? Thank you. Let's hope that experiment works out good. Any? Sam? We have basically 6 changes that we have to train. And so we wrote down all the people that are affected by those changes, and then we're going to start training on that. One of the training is actually going back through on how to create M-Field correctly and do all the steps on M-Field for all the supervisors. But, you know, anything about training, you just don't do it one time. You got to have the person doing it consistently. They got to have enough repetition. You got to do a lot of follow-up. So this gatekeeper or this person that's checking on the work orders that are completed, if they're wrong, those work orders get sent back to the foreman to recreate or do whatever needs to be done to fix that. So we're kind of thinking that's a training tool as well. You know, you got something wrong, now go back and fix it. It's not designed just for that person to fix that for them. So hopefully that answers that.
Just to touch on the metrics, how we can get from the initial state to the target state of 0 is basically with the initial touch in the beginning, when we have someone checking it out and verifying it, and then when we have the foreman actually doing the job. And we didn't really touch on what the foreman has to complete, but the foreman has to make sure the job description is in there, the business unit is in there, the failure code is in there, the tap and meter report is in there, the corrosion form is in there, the sod and the street cut are in there, and so they are inundated with a lot of stuff that's on this M-Field form. So what we want to do is we want to be able to clean it up in the beginning, have the foreman touch it, have us look at it again and make sure that everything is correct, and make sure that they have everything, and so therefore that's why we'll have a target state of 0. So once it actually hits completion, we have all of our data that we have in there, and that's why we have the metric. Most importantly, as with the paving requests and the sod requests, is that this 48% is a percentage of what we're actually not getting at all. So in the paving, we have completed work orders of valves and service lines, but there are no paving street cuts at all. So we want to get that up to 0 till we actually have all of our street cuts first, and then from having our street cuts, we actually get them in a target state of 1 day. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time.
So we have a 60-day update for you guys from Vince. So I will pass it over to Vince to let him know. He'll let you guys know how things are going.
All right, so I got a 60-day report out on our event that we had back in June. I'm kind of like a month behind, story of my life. We've done a lot of work in this event. This is the current team. I won't go through everybody. They've been working hard at this process of, the process was to identify our tap processing for developers and projects, and how can we streamline a process that's more effective and efficient. So we get our taps in a lot of various ways: emails, phone calls, walk-ins, project-related taps. So we've got a constant bombardment of different avenues that we receive these applications. So the scope of the event was to try to pinpoint a way that we can actually process these taps in a timely manner. The old process, one tap rep would have 4 or 5 developers who may hit that one tap rep with 100 taps at one time, while another tap rep had 2. So our new process this process helped us identify where our hang-ups were. So in our metrics, our tap application service level was initially at 27%. Our target is to get to 90. Our 30-day, we're at 40. Our 60-day, we're up at 54%. We had no standard work. Everybody was kind of doing things their own way in the beginning. Now we have standard work across the board. Our rework was a big critical piece. We touched every tap application in the previous process 26 different times in the rework process. Our target was to get that rework down to 13. Currently, our rework is down to 5, so we may have 5 applications that we actually have to go back with that customer and rework. Our quality score is one of the biggest improvements. We were at a quality score of 36 because we were rushing through trying to get these taps in the system. That it created a lot of rework because they were entered wrong, or the bad address, wrong lot size. So we started at 36%. Our target was 85, and we are at 85 currently. I'm hoping to get that up closer to 90, 95 by our 90-day report out. Our lead time is still going to be one of our hang-ups. We have a lot of taps that come in. We probably see about 40 new applications a week. Our initial goal was to turn these taps around in 3 days. So at our 30-day report out, we went through all of our backlog. We got everything identified, and we are working at a 14-day turnaround. We are still currently at a 14-day turnaround because of the volume of taps that we have. We're shooting for 7 days really for our 90-day report out. I'm not sure that we're going to make that, but we're going to give it a good effort. If you look at our completion plan, we are pretty much complete on everything that we need to do. We've got new laptops. The BST team has new SharePoint sites so we can communicate back and forth. Let's see, what are some of the other ones? We have developed what we have a hot rep. God, I'm losing my train of thought here. We have emergency contact cards that our field crews now use. So if they have a problem in the field, they have a hotline number that they can now call. We are still working on our standard SOPs, and of course, we still have our 90-day report out to go. So this is our trend and Pareto chart, and you can kind of see on our service level, if you look at the red and the green, it's kind of all over the map. But if you look at our trend line, we are improving in our trend. So we are increasing on our service level. Our schedule attainment down here on the bottom right is still kind of consistent on the trend level. We've had a couple days where we are actually able to meet our 14 days, and we've had basically the rest of the time we're really under that. So we're trying to work on our trend level. Our quality graph, our quality, like I said before, has increased greatly through this event. So I'm really hoping that that continues. If we look at our Pareto chart, on the schedule attainment, some of the issues that we still have is taps are complex. So research is taking a lot of time, and it's really one of our big problems. When you're trying to get 7 townhome complexes on a 100 by 20, or a 75-foot lot, and how do you get service in? They're really getting difficult to try to manage. So, but we've identified that as an issue. I put in here to show you, this is some of our tracking tools that we have. Our quality team helps me every month, and we sit down and we look at every tap application and every account that's set up by our tap reps during that month, and we evaluate probably about, 30 different items on the quality check, and we actually score every tap that they do. So If they missed a name, or if they missed a signature, or the lot size and the system is different from the TAP application, we identify it, they go back and clean it up, and then we move on from there. The biggest benefit to this whole process that I love is our process control board, because I can now control the work every day. I can look at who I have scheduled, who's out, who's in. We have lobby schedules. We have what we call a backup person that helps throughout the whole department. And then we have 2 people that are identified working the actual TAP log. So every day we look at our personnel. Every day I look at the log sheet, I identify what's there, and then we set up our work for every day. Every day is different, but it helps us control what we do in a day, and it helps us identify what our problems are. So the process is working. We had a lot of angst on the process. You know, it's a new procedure. Working first in, first out is a new concept. But they love it now. They're in a routine that they actually see the progress. We no longer have hundreds of taps in a backlog. I think right now we probably have 120 taps in our queue. So we are getting better at what we're doing. We're being more efficient with what we're doing. The new equipment has worked out great. Having laptops, we can now take our laptops, instead of having to log on to different computers, they just pull their laptop, dock it at the front desk, work with that customer, and keep on going. Come back to their office, dock again, and they don't have to wait for the system to catch up. So that's been a great help. Some of the things that we still have to work on is we have to find a more efficient way to do our research when we're doing our quotes for these new taps. Like I said, they're difficult, but we are identifying different methods and processes to help that out. We have a lot of calls from field reps that we're still trying to identify the best route to get those field questions answered in a timely manner. And of course, understanding the new process. So that's still been one of our big hurdles. Having a constant person in the lobby, identifying what their priorities are. Is it the customer? Is it the tap log? Is it the phone calls? So we're still kind of working on that understanding of that process. And I don't have a question slide because I don't want any. Oh, no. So, yes. Yes. Yes.
What I thought I heard you say was the requests are coming in faster than they have. They're ramping sort of up, and they're more complex.
Yes. Yes.
So my question is, have you done any calculations if the target stays on 3 days? Is it really now at this point a raw capacity issue? If you took your tag time, your cycle time,
Mm-hmm.
would it say that you need additional support to get that 3 days?
So yes and no. So part of the problem is that you may have a day where every quote that you do is easy, quick, and we hit our goal. And then you may have a day that you do 5 quotes and all 5 take the full entire day. So when we did look at our cycle time and we did reevaluate, but it's kind of difficult. You almost have to do that evaluation every day in order to see what that cycle time really should be. I think that we may end up changing our philosophy on our lead time. Is 3 days really practical with the staff that we have, and we may end up either extending that, or I'll be pushing for more people. But what we don't want to do is ramp up and say, okay, we need 2 more people to do this process, and then the building industry levels out, and then we have overstaff that we have to deal with at that same time. So we're trying to work it and get a metrics that actually fits what we currently have, and then make a determination from there, if that makes sense. Yes, we are still wrestling with that. Anyone else? Awesome, thank you.
All right, now that is all we have for you guys today. So have a nice Friday.